Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. It's now been 54 years since I've entered into this current birth. As the years go by, one notices changes. One notices increasingly the truth of the Buddha's teachings, change being one of the fundamental qualities that exist in all conditioned phenomena. With change then comes the gradual realization that none of this really belongs to us. What is it that we identify with as we're getting old? We think of my birthday. We like to identify with my birthday. What is it that we're identifying with? What is it that we identify with as being me and mine? This body? Is this really our body? We're celebrating the gradual decay of a human body, which is basically what a birthday is. Up to our mid-20s or so, we celebrate the gradual increase in strength and vitality, and then at a certain point, it's just a celebration of the gradual decline of the human body. Or maybe it's a celebration that we're not dead yet. So this is basically what birthdays are, but then they're centered around identification. With change comes the realization that so much of our bodies, our lives, are flowing by quickly, and so much seems to be out of our control. The changes in our body, for example, out of our control. Change in hair color, the change in strength. I noticed, how quickly it changes. When I first came to this monastery 12 years ago, I could run all the way from the top of that hill in gumboots down to jump the stream and run up to the top of the other valley without stopping. And sometimes I had to do that because we were always working and I had to communicate with people. That was the quickest way to do it. Or sometimes I'd have to chase wild goats, around the property, up and down the slopes after working all day, planting trees and building things. And I had the strength to do that. And that was only relatively a short time ago, and now I can't even contemplate doing that. So this is part of the truth of change, understanding how things change. Understanding change then makes it more clear to us. Are we attached? Are we holding on? What is it that we identify with? If we identify with things, anything, and we want it to remain the same, then that leads to the first noble truth of suffering. Anything. If we're attached to being young and beautiful. And when I say attached, it doesn't mean we have to be egotistical. I'm not talking about people who are very vain, but just normal identification. We look in the mirror when we're 25, when we're 30, and we identify with what we see. And then 30 years later, we look in the mirror and somehow we still identify with being a young person. So who is that old face in the mirror? And then we realize, is there any resistance to change? We look, is there any resistance to change? Change is just like this flowing river. Life is just flowing by. It's just flowing. And if you try to step in the middle of a stream or a river and stop the flow, people would think you're crazy. And yet often we do that in our own lives. Try to step in the middle of the flowing river of life and say, I wish I could hold on to this. I like this bit. I wish I could just slow the flow of time. But when we do that, then what happens? There's resistance. There's insanity. It's like when Like if you saw someone try to jump into a stream and stop the flow of water, you would think, well, that person's really lost it. Shouldn't they know that that's not possible? They're just going to create a lot of suffering for themselves and wear themselves out. And yet, in small ways and sometimes big ways, we do the same thing in our own life. Just wanting to hold on to the way things were, even if it's just looking in the mirror. How we identified with our bodies at a certain time. Each passing year, things change. And what is it that we identify with? When we talk about, say, our birthday, me, mine. We can identify with the people around us as being ours, even though they're not really ours. We think of our children, our parents, our wives. Again, just noticing the changes in the people around us. Does that bring up any resistance? Any resistance to that? Any resistance to change in fortunes? Sometimes things are going well, sometimes things are not going so well, sometimes things are flowing very smoothly at work, sometimes they're very difficult at work, full of obstacles. In the family, it's going very smoothly. Other times with the family, there's stresses and misunderstandings, sometimes arguments. This is just the nature of change. This is the nature of samsara, what we call the wheel of birth and death, that is constantly arising and passing away. So whatever happens, whether it feels wonderful, delightful, fantastic, exciting, just know that this too will be subject to change. This too will arise and pass away. Anytime things are frustrating or difficult, not what we want, then also just know too, well, this will also change. This is not an exception to the law of change, impermanence, anicca. So that leads to a helpful sense of balance, what we call equanimity. So when things are pleasant, we recognize they're pleasant. That's very nice. It's appreciated. We can appreciate the sense of pleasantness when we get what we want, when things are comfortable, and when people praise us. But then, when things are difficult, unpleasant, we lose what we want. We lose what we want, or we don't get what we do want. Then, realizing that, well, this too is impermanent. This will change. So this is how wisdom gradually develops over the years. If we allow ourselves to observe the functionings of daily life, observe the functionings of our life, observe through a lens or a perspective of Dhamma. Experiencing life without looking through the lens of Dhamma, it can sometimes be disappointing. As we get older, sometimes we wish it was different. It's easy to complain, easy to find fault. When things are wrong, generally we tend to blame things outside of us, blame other people. That's the easy way. Or even if we blame ourselves too much, even that's identification when we blame ourselves. And that's all unnecessary. Because as life goes by and we experience the mixture of happiness and sorrow that is normal, then if we're viewing it from a viewpoint of, here is one more experience that I can learn from. This is one more opportunity for developing wisdom, whatever it is in daily life. There's always something we can learn, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant. Sometimes it's the unpleasant things which help us to recognize where we're attached, where we're holding on to. And these are often the places that we can learn the most. As we get older with birthdays, then that can also help just to put things into perspective. We realize that time is limited. When we have a birthday when we're young, then it all seems like infinite possibilities. As the birthdays start to accumulate, and we realize, I'm not going to keep having birthdays forever, at least in this lifetime. Next lifetime, we get a whole new set. But in this lifetime, then the birthdays are going to be limited. The time with these particular people, the time in this particular place, the connections that we have with family members, friends, these are subject to a limitation of time. And then with each passing year, then it becomes more clear. Birthdays are just a convention, a social convention, but they can mark the passing of time and be an opportunity for us to reflect. In the same way that the Buddha encourages the monastic community to reflect each evening. So the days and nights are relentlessly passing. How well are we spending our time? So as time is flowing by, and then we have to think, well, how well am I spending my time? What am I doing with my time? How am I spending my days? How am I spending my nights? Am I gradually working towards what I aspire to? Or do I have a clear aspiration in life at all? So these are questions that are very good to reflect upon. What is it that we aspire to in life? Do we wish to be happy? If so, how do we conceive happiness? Do we wish to be of some benefit in the world? Do we wish just to be a good parent? What is our aspiration for life? And are we gradually working in that direction? Without a clear aspiration, it's so easy for life to gradually flow by, day by day. It's just like getting whittled away, worn away, eroded, like dirt on a hillside being eroded away by the winter rains, gradually flowing down into the stream and disappearing. If we're looking at life through the lens point of Dhamma, then this is not a problem. Aging can be a wonderful experience. So we gradually get old, and then hopefully we're wiser. I'm wise enough now that I would not attempt to run from the top of that hill in gumboots all the way down to the valley and up to the other side of the ridge. That's, at least in a small way, a recognition of the change of aging and being at peace with that. Being at peace with the way things are changing in the body, being at peace with the way things are changing in life, changing in our minds. So if our aspiration is to truly be happy, then how are we going to go about doing that? As the days and nights are relentlessly passing, we think, well, what am I doing with my time? It's so easy to spend time just getting caught up in things which aren't really that important. They seem like they're very necessary to do, but most of the things are just kind of to keep the daily life going, and then at the end of the day we feel tired and realize, well, what have I done it all for? Have I taken steps closer to what I aspire to in life? Often it's so easy to get caught up in things which are not really that important, the pettiness of life. So if we clarify what it is that we want in life, you want to be happy? How happy do you want to be? How deep do you want to take Dhamma practice? Do you want to have a fair chance at developing true insight in this lifetime? Do you want to have a fair chance at even maybe coming close to stream entry, sotapanna? Do we feel like we have a chance to really develop samadhi? To the degree that we develop samadhi, our insight will go correspondingly deep. If these things are important to us, then what are we doing on a daily basis to make that happen? When the Buddha talked about happiness, he didn't say that the Buddha Dhamma was not about being happy. He did. He described Nibbana as the highest happiness. It's just that the Buddha was wise enough to know that true happiness often lies in different places than the normal person looks for it. Normally we tend to look for happiness in places that actually in the long run just increase our identification, increase our attachment, increase our grasping, and in the end that just leads to more disappointment because we can't really hold on to those things. So when the Buddha was talking about the highest happiness, then that is really what we crave in our heart of hearts. Sense of peace, sense of contentment, something that is going to be a refuge beyond the fickle arising and passing away of conditioned reality, which is sometimes pleasant, sometimes unpleasant, constantly changing. The seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, physical sensations, and arising and passing away of thoughts, moods, perceptions, all of this which is so unreliable and so changeable. where can we find something which is actually stable and reliable? If we're going to invest in something that's going to be giving us happiness, then where can we find something that is actually stable and reliable? So this is a question that the Buddha asked us, to look for it. Buddhism is not a matter of just believing in the Dhamma, just believing in some formula, believing in the Noble Eightfold Path. It's a matter of putting it into practice and using our intelligence. Starting with our intelligence, then we gradually develop a little bit of wisdom. We all have some wisdom. It just needs to be encouraged and nurtured. We all have some samadhi, an ability to be peaceful. We all have that to some degree, but it just needs to be encouraged. And many of the things that we are involved in mainstream society just don't encourage the development of samadhi. They don't encourage being peaceful and being still and being quiet and see the benefit of tranquility and a serenity. Or they are consciously working against the idea of finding happiness through letting go. So much of our society is based upon becoming increasingly busy and full of holding on, grasping accumulation. So it takes a concerted effort, it takes an effort on our own part to recognize that, hey, I don't have to be a blind pawn in this game of the mainstream. I can be an independent, self-thinking, wise person, and I can determine what I aspire to in my own life and then work towards it, whether that fits in with anyone else's expectations or not. Surprising sometimes, even in a Buddhist culture, people who really start to practice the Dhamma, they get resistance. So if you find people who are practicing the Dhamma, they're the ones who should be encouraged. Encourage them. And encourage yourself. Because sitting quietly alone, spending time on retreat, reading Dhamma books, contemplating, this is not selfish. Just because we're not out physically helping someone else or looking after our family for a half an hour. This is time well invested. When we sit quietly and through the process of clarification and seeing things more clearly and insight developing, if we become more wise and if our kilesas, our defilements, reduce even a little bit, then that is the greatest gift that we can give our family. That's the greatest gift that we can give the people around us. And that's the greatest gift we can give ourselves. As the years fly by, then we recognize if I'm holding on to any fixed perception of who I think I am, then that will lead to a sense of disappointment. That will lead to a friction or stress in some way. So then we look, if we're suffering, then we look, well, what am I holding on to? What am I identifying with? Do I identify with the body? Yeah, of course we all do to some degree. Right? But then if we use our wisdom and recollect that, well, inevitably this body is just part of nature, isn't it? It's just composed of elements that go in through our mouth. They form parts of the body for a period of time, and then they flow out. This body is constantly changing, and within 1 year, I think about 98% of the composition of the body changes. The cells, molecules, atoms. And then within 7 years, it's completely different. So the body is constantly changing if we really look at it. Our minds, who we identify with, our personalities, these too are constantly changing. If we identify with being a particular way at a particular time, and then at other periods of time we're not like that anymore. Right? Does that give rise to a sense of disappointment, stress, suffering? Do we identify with a particular phase in our life? So these are good questions to ask, and as we get older, then we're looking, well, what is it that we identify with? When I say my birthday, we say happy birthday. What is it that we identify with as being mine? Is it really my birthday? Really, every day is a birthday if we look at it in terms of Dhamma. Every day that we are fortunate enough to wake up in the morning, then this is really an exceptional opportunity. Think, one more day to live. Well, how fantastic. What more could I learn in one day? Even the amount that we could learn just within one day is worth, living a whole lifetime. If we truly use one day to its full potential, we can rest assured we have lived a life well spent. And then we try to do our best every day to practice the Dhamma, to develop a continuity of awareness, to have a good sense of morality, what we call sila, maintaining a high degree of morality. Moving towards unconditional loving kindness, metta. Now, these are types of practice that we can all do. Everyone can practice like this. It's easy to love the people that we like. It's easy to be kind to the people who are kind to us. But then the people who are frustrating and difficult, who maybe we don't connect with their personality so much, but then still having a sense of caring for them, wanting them to be happy, truly caring for someone else. Even if it's our wife or our husband, your wife or your husband. You think, well, in what way do I love that person? Do I love them just because they give me something back? Do I love them because they love me back, or because they make my life easier in some way, or they represent security, or just pleasant to have someone else around, or it's just practical, someone to help cook and clean and drive? Why is it that we love somebody? And if they didn't do those things, would we still love them? If they stopped loving us back and stopped praising us, stopped giving us positive feedback, stopped helping us, would we still love them? And this is where worldly love switches into metta, or loving kindness, where even if we're not getting something back, then we can still have that sense of true caring for someone else's welfare. This is something we can practice every day. Practice not just with the people we care about, but especially with the people who maybe we're not naturally inclined to be exuberantly enthusiastic about loving, right? And that's the case. It's not everyone that we're naturally inclined to have positive feelings towards, and that's where we can really practice the Dhamma. That's why it's opportunity every day, no matter what is happening, to develop some aspect of the Dhamma. To develop aspect of right speech. This is something that we do every day. Unless you're on retreat, then you'll be speaking. What is it that we want to communicate? And we check, before we speak, can we establish mindfulness so that it's very clear why we are speaking? What's our motivation? What's our intention? Is it true? To what degree is it true? And is it the right time, the right place? Speaking is such an art, just to be able to say the right amount. Not too much, but not too little. It's a real art that we can keep practicing every day throughout our lives. And noticing the effects of speech. When our motivation, our intention is one way, then what is the result? What's the result on other people around us? What's the result in our own minds, depending on what we're saying? Are we saying things that are meaningful? Or sometimes we speak just because it's expected of us, or we think it's expected of us, or we're uncomfortable with silence. Actually, silence is a beautiful thing. So every day when we wake up, it's like a birthday. We wake up and think, oh, thank goodness. One more day to practice the Dhamma. One more year that is passed, where we have the opportunity to learn something. Well, how can I practice the Dhamma today? Every action throughout the day, developing a continuity of clear awareness. If you're just drinking a cup of tea, do that with full awareness. While you're brushing your teeth, do that with full awareness. And then as soon as your mind wanders, then you know. As soon as you start thinking about the future, worrying about the future, then you know. You realize, oh, that's just a habit. That's just a habit again, I see it. And then instead of being blindly pulled into worries and fears and desires, then we can recognize that, oh, these are the motivations that are arising at this time. I can recognize that, I can accept that, but I have a choice. I have a choice on whether I follow those or not. So then we start to experience some true freedom, so that we're not just slaves to our karmic habits. We develop a true sense of independence and freedom. And this is something we can all practice every day. When we approach life in this way, then every day is a birthday. Every day is a day that we can be grateful for. And at the end of the day, we reflect and say, well, have I learned anything today? Have I learned anything of value today? Have I helped somebody else today? Was there any time throughout the day that I could have helped somebody, but I chose not to? Or was there any time throughout the day that I could have done a little bit better? And if so, that's great. Maybe tomorrow I'll try even harder. Try to improve. Reflect at the end of the day. Was there any time that I said anything that maybe was misunderstood or I could have said better? Or reflecting, were there times that I said things in just the right way? Did things in a nice way? Was I kind? And reflect on all the good things that we do. Reflecting on the times that we're generous and helpful to other people. And then recognizing that, well, that's quite a good thing. Then it was a day well spent. Because if we also reflect on the good things that we do, the helpful, the beneficial, the wise things that we do, then that encourages us to develop those further, because we start to see the connection between doing wise things, living in a wise way, and our own peace and our own happiness, and the benefit of the people around us. When we begin to see that connection more and more clearly, that's the greatest motivation that we can have in life. That is the secret for our own peace, our own happiness, as well as the greatest benefit for the people around us. And then that starts to just keep increasing. And that becomes the main motivation in life. So this is something that we can all practice every day. If we practice this way, then at the end of every day, you can say, happy birthday. So I offer this for your reflections.
Andamang wajakata sadhu karanta dhammase sadhu sadhu